Part 23. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Xiao. Chapter 230. Seeing the face he had not seen for a long time, Su Tong almost shouted out the word master, but then he remembered that his face now looked like Zhao Jian, and the master did not recognize him at all. Fortunately, he reacted quickly and changed his words quickly without appearing sudden. "Oh, you recognize me?" Shuigui raised his eyebrows slightly and asked with squinted eyes. Now Su Tong suddenly became wary. Last time, he was ignorant and fearless, and walked away from the Hell Gate in a daze for a while. It was only when I learned about Bai Shan Kao that I realized that if I had said something wrong on the train, I would have been sent to see the King of Hell by my master in the next second. It can be seen that the master has never hesitated when making a move. If his next words are not on point, he, his disciple, may be directly killed in the hands of the master. After thinking for a moment, Su Tong thought for a while, with a look of helplessness on his face, and said in a tone of being a dead horse, "If I say that we have met before, and you have helped me, would you believe it?" Shuigui did not respond and just motioned for him to continue. Seeing that his master's expression was the same as when he was on the train, Su Tong's heart skipped a beat, knowing that what he said next was the most important thing. Therefore, he simply lay down and stopped continuing the topic. Instead, he muttered a set of formulas. "This mantra is the first ability passed down to me by my master, which is to find the grave and ask for directions." Sure enough, after hearing this mantra, the master raised his eyebrows slightly. When he looked at Su Tong again, the coldness in his eyes gradually faded a lot, and was replaced by doubt. After reciting a set of formulas, Su Tong called out the prop book and threw the 3 items from his hand like magic. When he saw these 3 things, the master's eyes flashed with a sparkle. These 3 things are the paper craftsman's book, the magic bell and the Wanbao mold. "Why do you have these things in your hands?" Looking at these 3 things, Shuigui's voice suddenly became stern. "They were originally mine, but by some strange coincidence, after we said goodbye outside the station last time, I took the wrong train and went to Black Lamp Hill. I accidentally became a ranger, but ended up getting involved in the battle between witchcraft and Gu in Shenmiao." Su Tong started to make it up. No, this wasn't making it up, it just reversed the order of things. Shuigui had come over from western Hunan before, and with his erudition he had some knowledge of the Miao people. When he heard about the Ascension Bureau, Shuigui couldn't help but fell into deep thought for a moment and then nodded. "This kind of thing is very mysterious." Su Tong said it superficially, but Shuigui could see it deeper. He knew that this kind of thing was not something he had experienced personally. There is no such detailed process. Su Tong, who was lying on the haystack, breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that his master was really interested in the Ascension Bureau. Speaking is a skill. Sometimes if you speak straight to the point, it will not be effective. Maybe you have not even finished what you said, and the master's patience will be wiped out. He will raise his hand and slap you away, so as not to listen to you. A lot of nonsense. So the first sentence he recited the curse and then threw the thing out was to tell the master first, "Don't kill me, we really know each other," and then talk about the Ascension Bureau, so that the master can understand what he encountered later. Things are so unbelievable. "Why do you say Shengxian Bureau?" Naturally, it aroused the master's curiosity. After all, for a person like him, it would be damning if he didn't have any curiosity about becoming an immortal. After finishing speaking, Su Tongke whispered, "I also got the fairy treasure from a tomb robber by mistake. As a result, after I opened the stone box enshrined on the altar, I became what I am now. I don't know what happened. In short, I can't explain all the problems clearly. Anyway, that's what happened." After saying this, Su Tong looked at his master Shuigui with an innocent look on his face without a blushing face, as if he was harmless to humans and animals. Can Master believe such an unbelievable thing? Of course not, but even as a master who studies heaven and earth, he cannot deny it. As long as the master does not deny it, his goal will be achieved. Of course, only a person like Master dared to say this. If he were a tall and reckless man, if he said this, he would probably have his head smashed open if he raised the hammer. I remember there was an old doctor in the hospital. This old doctor is amazing. He is well versed in ancient literature and history. The books at home are piled as high as a mountain. He was almost nominated for the title of National Academician. As a result, after he started studying the Book of Changes, he became nagging. His family had no choice but to send him to the hospital. Su Tong has been in contact with this old doctor for a long time, and he can probably understand this kind of person's way of thinking. People like them, the more they know, the more ignorant they feel. For things they cannot deny, they often choose to believe. Because if they believe, they will study further, finally find out the flaws, and then use their own knowledge to deny it is the process of knowing what it is and why it is. Maybe the old doctor never dreamed that when he started trying to decipher the I Ching, he got himself confused. The master is just like the old doctor. This is exactly the case. As long as he can't deny this matter, even if he doesn't believe his words immediately, at least he can be safe for now. Sure enough, after the master thought for a moment, his expression really softened a lot, but Su Tong couldn't stop laughing at the next sentence. I saw the master rolling up his sleeves. The Ascension Bureau you said is indeed wonderful. I believe what you said. Since you admit that you are a member of the 8th sect, then according to the rules of the 8th sect, if you kill a fellow sect, you should be punished. Rather than letting you die in the hands of outsiders, it would be better for me to send you on your way myself. Ah! Su Tong was dumbfounded. Before he could speak, the master cupped his hands and said, "Let's go." After saying goodbye, Su Tong's eyes instantly went dark, followed by a huge force that came like an overwhelming force, as if he was driven directly into the bottomless abyss. In an instant, there were bones in front of him, and screams could be heard from time to time. A big hand covering the sky and the sun stretched out from the darkness, and countless densely packed arms stretched out from the palm, and soon the sky in front of them would be covered. Suddenly, a bone-cutting cool breeze hit him, blowing on his body as if it was going to tear apart his flesh and fascia. As for this process, he could only watch helplessly, with no power to resist at all. Even his thoughts froze in this moment. Plop! There was a sound of falling water in my ears, and my vision was covered by the dim yellow water. I was like a stone sinking in the water. In a daze, he saw the shadow of a bridge on the water. A man and a woman were standing on the bridge, seemingly talking about something. When he wanted to take a closer look, the man and woman seemed to be aware of it and glanced at it coldly. Just a glimpse of it made him feel like he was out of his mind. At this moment, the man on the bridge suddenly moved his brows, as if he remembered something, and opened his mouth to say a few words, but Su Tong couldn't hear him at all. He just stared at the man's lips and vaguely read out a few words. "Meet again." As the man spoke, he threw something toward the water. Su Tong couldn't see clearly what it was. He only felt a flash of green light in front of his eyes, and he fell faster. In the darkness, red light balls appeared at some point. The light balls emitted blood-red light and illuminated the surrounding area. Su Tong stared with wide eyes. There was no fear in his eyes, only curiosity. However, the red light suddenly shined brightly, completely illuminating the darkness, and 9 lion heads were seen slowly shaking their bodies in the darkness. Those sun-like light balls were the lion's eyes. The 9-headed lion swayed its body like a mountain, opened its big mouth that seemed to be able to swallow the sky and the sun, and breathed out lightly in the air. Suddenly, Su Tong was like a small boat in the stormy waves, floating in the chaos. He was blown to nowhere. He didn't know how long had passed, as if he had been drifting in this current for 10, 20, or even 30 years. When he opened his eyes again, he found that he was like a giant palace in front of him. Like ants, they are not even as high as a brick. I raised my head and looked up. Above the misty clouds, there was a plaque with 3 words written in an unknown font. I didn't recognize them, but when I saw the 3 words, they instinctively came to mind. The content of the word, Palace of Hell. Worship the mountain buckle, 1 buckle hurts people, 2 buckles invite gods, and 3 buckles knock on the door of the king of hell. Unexpectedly, he would actually be sent to the palace of hell in the end. Looking at the door in front of him that seemed like entering the sky, the first thought in Su Tong's mind was, should he take a pee and write down his visit here? Just as he was about to unbutton his belt, a cold snort suddenly came from his ears. Following the tightening of his collar, the scene he had just seen was quickly reversed as if he were watching a lantern. Return. There was a cold scolding, and Su Tong felt as if his head had been hit by something. He subconsciously covered his head with his hands and lay on the ground for a while before opening his eyes again. When he looked again, he found that he was still lying on the haystack, but to his surprise, his body, which could not move at this moment, could already move. Huh! Just when he was doubtful, he looked up and saw his master Shuigui's eyes hung looking at him with a smile. His face no longer had the stern look before. He took out a bottle from his sleeve and threw it to him, and then said with a smile, "How about it, Yin Cao Huan Quan Yi, it's a good day trip." I thought I would be scared to death now, but Su Tong was stunned for a moment and asked with curious eyes, "Can I get a monthly subscription?" Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shuigan Xiao. Chapter 231. Life is not created equal, just like a Ferrari sports car. Some people can afford it as soon as they are born, while some people can't even buy a steering wheel after struggling all their lives. If there is true justice in the world, it is death. But if one day you can experience the full process of death, and even go out to play for a day and be brought back safely, this will be much more exciting than going to the zoo to feed tigers. I saw a lot of interesting things in Underworld, but I still felt like I didn't finish them all. It's like going to visit the Forbidden City, but many palaces in the Forbidden City are not open to the public, which makes people curious about what treasures are hidden in those palaces that are not open to the public. So, since our family has this condition, you can always send me down to have a look. In the small courtyard of Shangqing Palace, Su Tong brought the boiled tea to his master with a shy face. Shuigui took the water and glanced at him, poked Su Tong's belly and whispered, "You are going to see the underworld? Think I didn't see those 2 big bottles outside your door?" The bottles Shuigui pointed to were placed outside the door. They were all large 4.5L water bottles. Su Tong grinned. The master sent him to the underworld, and when he came back, not only did he get rid of the negative effects on his body and resume normal actions, but more importantly, he had an additional buff underworld baptism. Baptism of the underworld temporarily increases perception by 12%. The soul strength of those who have been baptized by the underworld is enhanced. They are not harmed by illusions. Damage to ghosts is increased by 200%. Duration, 30 hours. Such a naughty buff is like a monster nemesis. Who cannot be tempted by it? In addition to this buff, the stamp polyposis tumor that I originally destroyed was supposed to occupy a slot in the prop book permanently, but it was gone in a flash. It can be seen that this Huanquan water is simply a treasure, and it is so refreshing to bring 2 buckets back. Unfortunately, Shuigui saw through his little thoughts at a glance. He took a sip of tea and threw a sign to him. This brand is not Shuigui's, but something Su Tong brought back after he came back from the underworld. Even Shuigui was surprised. Healing Su Tong's injuries was second, and more importantly, he wanted to take the opportunity to test Su Tong. Which normal person would go to the underworld and come back without bursting into tears and vowing to be a good person? In the end, this kid actually still wanted to go and wanted to take a monthly subscription. Shuigui had to believe that he was the brat he met on the train. Su Tong held the sign in his hand and looked at Shuigui curiously. Master, can this thing really summon ghosts and gods? This sign was given to him by the man and woman on the bridge during his previous trip to the underworld. At that time, he saw the man in black clothes saying that they had met again, so he casually gave him this sign. When I woke up and touched my chest, it was true, the brand was in my arms. A wooden sign. The sign said it was made of wood, but it didn't look like it. You could still hear the sound of metal after knocking it a few times. It was a question mark when it was thrown into the prop book. It seemed like it needed to go back for identification. But there was no need for him to go back for appraisal. There was a knowledgeable master standing next to him, so Su Tong immediately handed the sign to the master. At this moment, the master was drinking tea and did not hide anything when he heard his inquiry. This is a spiritual tablet, not the one used by ordinary people, but it is almost the same. The inscriptions on the back write the names of two people, one is Xiechi and the other is Fan Bie. Theoretically, you can invite two people, but these two uncles are not something you can control. I saw the master put down the tea bowl as he spoke, stretched out his thumb and index finger towards Su Tong and pinched it in front of him. You must have this. As the saying goes, money can make the world go round. Regardless of the dead or alive, it is inseparable from this thing. It's just that the dead people's money is divided into different levels. The money they can use to guide the way is to use it for those little ghosts. If they encounter ghosts, they will use gold and silver ingots. As for the two uncles Siekif and Ba, let alone gold and silver ingots, they don't care even if they have mountains of gold and silver. Being able to give this brand to Su Tong obviously meant that there was something in Su Tong that they were interested in. After being reminded by his master, Su Tong immediately understood. It was probably the few notes he had snatched from Libo. I remember that I was very curious to see that thing at the time. It was indeed different from ordinary ghost coins. The writing and patterns printed on the yellowed oil paper were not only clear but also had a layer of oil paint, giving people a very thick texture. It's a pity that he burned all the money at that time and didn't keep any of them. If I had known that it was so easy to use, I would have kept two of them. He calmly put the wooden board in his pocket, then threw it into the prop book and took a look. Sure enough, the wooden sign had been authenticated. Spirit card, 10/10. Special summoning items can summon the yin god to help, but the yin god is very expensive and requires travel expenses. He will not fight with living people. He is limited to dealing with evil and sneaky things. Burn money first and then do things. Looking at the entry on the spirit tablet, the corners of Su Tong's mouth twitched a few times, and he gave this thing to himself. He really valued his money. If he followed the master's wishes, he would not be able to pay for the money no matter how much money he spent. Come to the two masters on the bridge to help you. But when it came to this matter, Su Tong suddenly remembered something in his mind. After quickly rummaging through the prop book, his heart moved and he hurriedly said, "Master, wait a minute." Su Tong said and ran out pretendingly, then ran in again after a while, took a wooden board and handed it to Shuigui. "Look at this." Shuigui didn't pay attention at first, but when he saw the wooden board, his eyes suddenly lit up. "Where did you get this?" "A poor man told me that there were still a bunch of antiques. I looked at the things and thought they might be used by us, so I kept them." The rest of the antiques were placed in the soup restaurant. Su Tong directly passed on the origin of the wooden boards to the batch of antiques, and also told Shuigui about the soup restaurant. In this way, he not only explained the origin of the things, but also mentioned the soup restaurant incidentally, and wanted to ask the master to give him some advice. Shwegoi put his hand on the wooden sign and carefully touched every inch of the wooden sign with his fingers. The more he looked at it, the more he liked it. However, when he saw the hole in the wooden sign, he couldn't help but shake his head with regret. It's a pity. This is a real treasure. It's just that the user did many unjust things and attracted divine punishment. It was struck by lightning. Shwegoi pointed to the scorch mark on the damaged wooden sign. It's not easy to repair this thing. The materials are okay. If you have a chance, you can find a coffin buried underground and just take off a coffin board. The trouble is that you can repair this. I'm afraid it's hard for people to find things now. Hey, that's a shame. Seeing that his master couldn't repair it, Su Tong could only put the mold away with great regret, and wait until later to see an expert to see if there was any other way to repair it. Master, what should we do next? Those old thieves will definitely not give up, especially the old thieves named Kinju. I was almost plotted by this old thieves last time. Su Tong picked up the teapot, poured a new cup of tea for his master, and began to complain. You don't know, that old thief called out 5 or 6 people and insisted on interfering with me on the street. A group of old guys bullied me. They all won, but this old thief also used evil tricks to sit on the ferry stake. You know, I almost fell on it, but luckily a village guard brother helped me. Su Tong briefly explained the process while observing his master's words and expressions to see how he would react. Sitting on the immortal pile. Sure enough, after hearing this, the master raised his brows, and his face suddenly turned evil. This old guy Kinju is getting more and more unruly. No, this old thief only wants others to abide by the rules. He doesn't follow the rules himself. He hurt me a lot last time. He was the one who did the trick last night, and that Feng Lelu. There were not many opportunities to complain. Su Tong told all his experiences during this period in one breath. The focus was on Feng Lelu and Qian Xiao. When it came to the critical moment, the look in his face was full of grievances. Right, master, you make the decision for me. Who is Shwegoi? Of course he knows what Su Tong means, but these old guys have indeed gone too far. He immediately patted his thigh and put down the tea bowl in his hand. Let's go. Shwegoi walked out as he said that. Su Tong's eyes lit up and he followed with a pleased expression on his face. The two went straight to the city. After arriving in the old city, they first had a meal at a noodle restaurant. Good guy, you don't know this if you don't eat it. When you eat it, you'll be shocked. Su Tong thinks he can eat enough, but it turns out that his master can eat it better than him. Ordinary people may not be able to finish a large bowl of braised noodles. Su Tong ate 4 large bowls and was half full. There was a big battle last night that left him exhausted, and then he was sent to Yin Cao for a day trip by his master. After all the hard work, he still had no water in him, and his stomach was long gone. The master ate 8 large bowls in one go. He slurped down a bowl of noodles and finished it in a few times. Facing Su Tong's surprised eyes, the master said calmly, I have been busy traveling during this period, and I have eaten it all being pestered by a few beggars. I didn't even have time to eat a bite of food. Beggar. Su Tong knew that his master had killed several beggar gangs, but he didn't know why his master would take action against the beggar gangs. He asked casually while eating noodles and found out that it was he who saw the beggar gangs when he passed by Bazhong. A group of people committed crimes in the local area, breaking the hands and feet of abducted children and using them as tools for profit. After learning about this, Master was unwilling to let them go, so he sent them to see the King of Hell. The man who Buletin Chen wanted to kill was the youngest son of the leader of the beggar clan. Later, when he was in Hanzhong, several elders of the beggar gang came over. He wanted to reason with a few people, but the beggars were unreasonable and he simply killed them all. The master spoke in an understatement, but Su Tong could feel the murderous aura in the master's words, as if he was just killing cats and dogs casually. The two of them ate for a while, then paid and left. It wasn't that they were full, but that they ate so much that they attracted a group of people to watch. Seeing this, they simply stopped eating. After turning the street and walking down the cross street for a few steps, Su Tong paused, pointed at the locked door in front of him and said, "This is it. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 232. Fenglai Tower is a famous place in the world. Every stranger who comes here can get some strange news more or less. The weirdest thing is the opera storytelling performed on stage every day. It obviously seems to have nothing to do with me, but if you look carefully, you can always find that it seems to be inextricably related to me. Su Tong has long wanted to make trouble, but he never had the chance. Today he brought his thigh, just to see what kind of secrets of the universe are hidden in this Fenglai building. Shuigui, who was standing next to him, couldn't help but his eyes lit up after hearing what Su Tong said about Fenglai building and the information Gao Zhou got from the leader of the beggar gang. He became more interested in Fenglai building. It's a new idea to use others to predict your own karma. The master just listened to Su Tong's words, and he already roughly understood the wonderful place of Fenglai Tower. At this time, he slowly opened the closed door first, and saw a person walking out of the door. It was the boss of Fenglelu. "Two distinguished guests are here. My boss has prepared tea and has been waiting for you for a long time." The shopkeeper clasped his hands and politely invited the two of them to come in, but Shuigui pressed Su Tong's shoulders. "Child, we are guests. Since we are guests, should we talk about the dust on our bodies before entering?" I saw Shuigui pinching his fingers as he spoke, and he didn't know when he pinched a stone on his fingertips. When he flicked his fingers, the stone flew out with a bang. The next moment, there was a cracking sound in everyone's ears. The mirror fell from the door beam and shattered into pieces. When the shopkeeper saw that the mirror was broken, his expression changed. He raised his head to look at Shuigui, only to see Shuigui point to Su Tong the top of the beam at the door with a smile on his face. "You look at the 33 beams used as columns. There is a heavenly gate carved on a beam, which is the 33rd heaven. Whoever enters will have his luck crushed." After speaking, he pointed to the mirror on the ground. "It is rumored that the king of Qin had a treasure called the king of Qin's bone mirror. Regardless of whether it is true or not, Mission's numerology and physiognomy happens to have a technique called bone viewing through a mirror, which uses two faces. Mother Mirror, as soon as you enter the door, your destiny will be clearly illuminated." Oh, Su Tong took a look and saw that there were indeed 33 beams, going up one layer after another, like a pagoda shape. If you don't pay attention, you will only feel that the beams in front of the door are a bit high, and you may not be able to see them. Come up with a reason. He thought to himself, no wonder people already knew where they came from as soon as they entered the door. It turns out that this is the problem. After finishing speaking, the master looked around and said with a smile, "What a good feng shui. Luoshui is in the front, and the city river is in the back. 3 roads lead directly to the main road. As the saying goes, the waterways are smooth and the wealth is endless. It's just that my house occupies such a good location. What a pity the tea house is, don't you think so, shopkeeper?" The big shopkeeper couldn't answer the question for a while. He was trying some tricks in front of his house. It couldn't be said to be unpredictable, but after so many years, he could tell that the only one in front of him was the one in front of him. Cold sweat was already breaking out on his forehead. It's a pity that there is no drone, otherwise if you look from above, you will see that the layout of the tea house is like a toad lying on the ground, holding 2 streets in its left hand, with the main door facing the main road and its butt facing the moat. This is the notorious water and land golden cicada in Feng Shui. The reason why Shwegoi joked with a smile that such a good fortune should not be a tea house. As the saying goes, water brings wealth. If you drink tea in the belly of the golden cicada, it will invisibly kill you. The wealth is sucked away. It's like drinking tea, leaving behind tea residue, and finally throwing it into the moat from behind Jin Chan's butt. In short, this feng shui scheme is the most destructive. The boss designed it very cleverly. Even some strangers did not notice it. Unexpectedly, Shwegoi could clearly see the layout of his tea house with just one look. Seeing the embarrassment on the face of the big shopkeeper, Shwegoi smiled and patted the non-existent dust on his hands, lifted up his coat and led Su Tong into the door. As soon as he entered the door, Su Tong felt that the temperature inside the building was at least 5 or 6 degrees lower than outside. Then he looked at the 6 or 7 large ice cubes placed under the tea house table. Although 5 or 6 large ice cubes are inconspicuous, you may not be able to buy this thing with money in this era. The tables and benches in front of the stage have been cleared away, leaving only 2 taishi chairs and a small tea table. The tea and fruit plates have been placed above, obviously prepared for the 2 of them. Shwegoi sat on the chair generously, but Su Tong did not dare to sit down. He followed the rules when he was with Mr. Song and stood behind the master obediently. When the shopkeeper saw this, he couldn't help but feel relieved. It's true, this boy is really Shwegoi's disciple. The shopkeeper didn't know the inside story and just thought that Su Tong was Shwegoi's apprentice. The only fault was that Shwegoi's appearance was too young. "Senior, my boss has a serious illness and is unable to see guests. Today I will deliver the news. Do you think it's okay?" The shopkeeper stepped forward and asked cautiously. Shwegoi picked up the tea bowl and ignored the shopkeeper. He just took a look at the tea and said with a smile, "There is snow in Baitan, the tea is pretty good. Don't stand, sit down and drink some tea. It's good for digestion." The second half of Shwegoi's sentence was naturally addressed to Su Tong. The master asked him to sit down, and of course he would not stand again. I sat down generously and took a look at the tea. I saw that the tea was clear and moist, exuding a light jasmine fragrance. There were a few white jasmine flowers floating on it, which was really beautiful. Just like the name of this tea, there is snow falling in Baitan. After taking a sip, the fragrance immediately hits your nose, and the fragrance of tea lingers around your teeth for a long time. After one sip, I felt even more refreshed. After just a few sips, I suddenly felt a little hungry. The tea is good, and the snacks are also good. It looks like they were made by a famous master. Eat quickly. Shwegoi pushed a stack of mung bean cakes in front of him with a doting look on his face. I saw that this plate of mung bean cake was made extremely delicately, with peonies carved on the square top, and the skin on the outside was plump and delicate. When Su Tong touched it with his fingers, it was still hot, as if it had just come out of the pan. When I opened it, I saw that the bean paste inside was as fine as grains of sand, with a faint scent of osman thus. The fragrance was subtle, but it was cleverly combined with the taste of the mung bean cake itself, ensuring that it did not overwhelm the cake. After taking another bite, I felt that the texture was smooth and dense, the taste was fragrant, soft and non-sticky to the teeth, and the more I ate, the more fragrant it became. Coupled with the cup of tea at my hand, which is fragrant and refreshing, it really has a unique taste. The master and the apprentice ate with gusto, and the face of the big shopkeeper on the side became more and more ugly, as if he was being ignored by being left there. At this moment, a note fell on the bay window on the 3rd floor. The big shopkeeper hurriedly stretched out his hand to catch it, and was stunned for a moment. After quickly saying a few words in the ear of the waiter on the side, he saw the waiter carrying a box in not long after. The box was opened, and it was completely filled with antique calligraphy and paintings. If you took out any of the items inside, they would be priceless treasures. It's a pity that the master doesn't like this thing, and Su Tong doesn't care about it either. Seeing that the two people ignored him, the big shopkeeper could only look at the small window on the third floor. After a while, another note floated down from the small window on the third floor. After reading it, the corner of the shopkeeper's mouth twitched a few times. He put the note away and said to Shwegoi respectfully, "Senior, my boss knows that you are here today. Please give me an explanation. If this is the case, what should I do? Senior, I would like to ask you to figure out a way out." Shwegoi glanced at the shopkeeper, picked up the teacup and took a few sips. He glanced at Su Tong, who was eating deliciously, and stretched out two fingers, "Close the door." The big shopkeeper was startled, stared blankly at Shwegoi's hand, and asked in disbelief, "Are you asking us, Feng Lilu, to close the door?" Now the waiters on the side were annoyed. "Why do you want us to close the door?" As soon as he finished speaking, Shwegoi finally smiled. He picked up the teacup and stood up from the chair. He handed the teacup to the shopkeeper and loosened his fingers. Boom! The fine blue and white porcelain bowl immediately fell to the ground and broke into pieces. "If you don't close it, I'll close it for you." After the master finished speaking, he looked sideways at the small window on the third floor. His eyes seemed to have pierced through the darkness inside the window, and they locked on the blurry figure at a glance. "Do you want me to help you, or do you want to close it yourself?" In the shadow behind the small window, a dark figure shook a few times and dropped a piece of paper with only one word on it: "Close." "Boss." Seeing the word Guan written in white and black letters on it, the big shopkeeper's eyes turned red. He had been in Fenglelu for so many years, and this place was like his home. He shut it down when he asked. It was as painful as digging out his flesh. You go too far." The clerk took a step forward and was about to charge forward, but was held tightly by the shopkeeper. He knew that although these clerks were all capable, if they really rushed forward, they would be seeking death. He took the clerk's arm and looked up at the small window. He saw a hand sticking out of the small window. The hand was very slender, but its skin looked sickly pale. There was no paper left in the hand. There were only two words written on it: "Go quickly." "Boss." Seeing these two words, the shopkeeper's eyes turned red and he fell to his knees. The other guys knelt down when they saw this. They had been greatly favored by Fenglelu over the years. This was their home. If they were allowed to leave, they would be homeless again from now on. "Boss, if you don't leave, we won't leave either." "Right." Seeing the shopkeeper and several others kneeling on the ground, the hand in the small window finally retracted, but after a moment, a bolt of fluorescent lightning flew out of the small window. Shwegoi pinched the piece of fluorescent object in his hand with his fingertips. It was none other than another jade piece of fairy treasure. Su Tong watched from the side, but he didn't expect that the second jade piece was actually in the hand of Fenglelu boss. Looking at the jade piece, Shwegoi reluctantly nodded and said to the shopkeeper and others, "I'll make a pot of tea. I'll give you another half hour. If you don't leave for half an hour, don't leave." After everyone heard Shwegoi's words, they were stunned for a moment, then looked at the small window, and then looked at the jade piece in his hand. Finally, the shopkeeper suddenly stood up and said angrily, "What do you mean, Your Excellency? After collecting the things, you still want to kill them all? It's too much." Seeing their excited expression, Su Tong stood up silently, took out the pistol and started playing with it. Looking at the dark muzzle of the gun, the shopkeepers frowned and finally remembered that there were still people sitting next to them. With a big killer. The news of what happened last night has already spread. So many people died, but this kid was still not killed. The last explosion caused heavy casualties to the people in Chajuli Yulai. This is a madman. And Shwegoi is an old lunatic. With these two lunatics sitting here, it is obviously impossible to reason with them. At this moment, the closed door on the third floor finally opened. A man in his 50s came out. He stood on the corridor and lowered his head to look at Shwegui. He slowly opened his mouth and saw the man. The upper and lower lips seemed to be stuck together. As his mouth opened, blood immediately flowed out, making it painful to the naked eye. After the man opened his mouth, he uttered his first words in 40 years, "Old thief, you are destined to die." Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 233. Don't die a good death. The roar echoed in the huge tea house, and the resentment inside made everyone feel hairy. Even the big shopkeeper had never heard the boss speak, but he didn't expect that when he opened his mouth, it was just such a vicious curse. Su Tong stood next to Shwegui. The moment the man spoke, he clearly felt that something different seemed to be surrounding his master. But that feeling was fleeting, and when he wanted to feel it more clearly, the strange aura disappeared. After the man upstairs finished speaking, his face turned red, like a pigskin that had just been scalded in boiling water. Seeing that everyone was about to lie down, the shopkeeper and others hurried upstairs and hurriedly got out of the man's arms. Take out a small box. The octagonal box was about the size of a baby's fist. When opened, there was a white wax pill inside. The shopkeeper pinched the wax pill open, and a small pill wrapped in gold foil appeared in his hand. The man swallowed it together with the gold foil. After the man took this pill, his whole breath recovered. When he opened his eyelids, he saw Shwegui standing below and looking at him with a smile. Seeing that he was awake, Shwegui held his hands and smiled, "Ha ha ha ha, thank you." "Thank you." The man was stunned for a moment, then smiled coldly and stammered, "I have been practicing the mantra for 40 years, you. Seeing that he was speaking awkwardly, Shwegui simply waved his hand to signal him not to speak. "Since it is a blessing of military liberation, how can I not thank you? My Taoist friend has helped me for 40 years, and it is too late for me to be happy. I have to die a good death. Since it is a great kindness, ha ha ha." The man squinted his eyes and took a closer look at Shwegui. When he saw the genuine smile and calm expression on his face, the man's hair instantly turned white. He pointed at Shwegui and opened his mouth, but no words came out. Seeing his furious look, Shwegui didn't give them any nonsense. "I'll wait for you for half an hour. If you don't leave, just stay here." Saying that, Shwegui took Su Tong out. "Master, that guy." After walking out of the tea house, Su Tong worriedly asked his master what was going on with that guy's silent chant just now, and whether he could really curse you. After all, in reality, the master did not die well in the end. Even though he had used the opportunity of filing a complaint to tell his master how to break the immortal stake, he still felt uneasy in his heart. Shwegui smiled when he heard the words, "Who are you trying to scare with 40 years of silence? As for whether it's good or bad to die, since it's all death, it's just a matter of whether death is more comfortable or more uncomfortable. The immortal soul is falling into the 9 netherworld. There's nothing to be afraid of. We've never seen anyone in our profession die a good death. If someone can die a good death, it would be a great blessing." Blessing. Su Tong's heart moved, and he immediately thought of Mr. Song, thinking, "Master should have a good death, right?" Seeing his confused look, Shwegui couldn't help but ask, "Has the pharmacist experienced it?" Su Tong's heart skipped a beat. Knowing that his master's tendency to be a teacher was coming back, he rolled his eyes and said, "Can I say that I prefer Taoism?" Shwegui curled his lips and scolded with a smile, "It's too strong to make sense. Go read it when you get back. There are 9 ways to die violently and the theory of a good death in the Medicine Master's Sutra. If you read it clearly, you will understand." "Then what is Bingja?" Su Tong asked quickly. "There is a record in Yunji Kizwan Volume 85 Tai Chi Genren Fei Xian Bao Sword Sutra that if you drink a pill with water and lie down hugging grass, others will see you have died of injuries in an empty room, which means the soldiers are relieved. Shuigui squinted his eyes and replied, but Su Tong didn't understand a single word of his answer. He refused to say a word when he asked the master again. He could only refer to the book Yunji 7 Signs mentioned by the master. Write down the title of the book and look at it carefully when you get back. While the two were talking, they saw the big shopkeeper and others walking out carrying a coffin. The waiters in the tea house looked at Shuigui with unkind expressions. The big shopkeeper stepped forward and raised his hands to Shuigui. You are the great bodhisattva who has crossed the sea, but you use thunderous methods and do not forget the heart of a bodhisattva. When the wind comes to the building, it's closed, but what you closed is just a building, what you can't close is the door. The big shopkeeper poked his heart with his hand, and with a meaningful smile on his lips, he bowed to Shuigui and Su Tong, then turned around and disappeared into the street with the coffin and the others. Su Tong took a look at the coffin and was sure that the old guy was not dead. He was just hiding in the coffin. He couldn't help but whispered, "Master, let the old guy go like this. Let's go, it's not time to settle accounts with them yet." Shuigui said, looking at the plaque of Fenglai building in front of him, his eyes flashed with cold light. He bowed his hands towards the building in front of him, and the plaque suddenly broke into pieces. The door slammed shut tightly, and a strange atmosphere suddenly enveloped the building. The atmosphere disappeared quickly, but he could feel that there seemed to be a terrifying force behind the closed door. Sealed in it. Pay homage to Shankao. Even though I knew that Master's Bashan button was so powerful that it made people cry, but I didn't expect that the Bashan button could be used like this. For a moment, his eyes sparkled, and he raised his head and looked at Master. If I go in now, can I go straight to the underworld? Shuigui raised his eyebrows. Want to learn? Su Tong's head was like a chicken pecking at rice, and he nodded wildly. Even though in reality he had obtained the mountain button taught by his master, what he had learned was only superficial. Compared with the master's power, it is inferior to heaven and earth. I'm going to go back and rest first. Don't you want to go to the soup restaurant? Go there by yourself. Come to me when you've finished what you're doing. I'll teach you well then. When the master said the last few words, his eyes glanced up and down, the nasolabial folds at the corners of his mouth slightly raised, and his smile felt very cold. Su Tong suddenly had a fuzzy feeling in his heart. He always felt that his master looked at him strangely, so he quickly nodded in agreement. Then he called for a rickshaw and took Master back to Shangqing Palace to rest. After sending Master off, Su Tong straightened his clothes, put on Jack's mask again, and then turned and walked towards the soup restaurant in the eastern suburbs. When he arrived at the soup restaurant, he found that Gao Zhou and Chen Jian were both waiting for him in the soup restaurant. When he saw Chen Jian taking a vigorous step, he rushed out, "Oh, where have you been? There was almost a quarrel here last night." Chen Jian told what happened last night. Last night, several bosses came over to buy antiques. All of them came with money, and for no other reason than to smash the stubble on the cup. Last night, these bosses came to buy antiques. They were about to start a fight. If Chen Jian hadn't looked like a glaring King Kong, they would probably have wanted to rob him. But Su Tong was not here, and Chen Jian was resigned to death and refused to let go no matter what. As a result, the bosses who came to receive the goods drank a lot of beef offal soup and left cursing in the morning. Are the mother and son here? No, but the man identified several other treasures last night. I'm afraid the news has spread by now. The man Chen Jian was talking about was the guest who usually sat at the door without talking or drinking soup. Su Tong nodded, followed Chen Jian into the soup restaurant, then walked up to Gao Zhou and slapped the table. What happened to you last night? Ah! Gao Zhou was stunned for a moment, then took a closer look at Su Tong's face, and then glanced at his cuffs like lightning. When he saw the blue ink on his cuffs, he realized that the person in front of him was none other than Empress Su Tong, whom he had longed for. My heart suddenly let out a long sigh of relief. He had been sitting here for a long time today, just waiting for news about Su Tong. The more he waited, the more anxious he became. He was so anxious that he felt as if there was a fishbone stuck in his neck. Seeing Su Tong at this time, Gao Zhou couldn't help but let out a long burp, which felt like he was burping out all the stuffy air in his stomach. "You're finally here. There was such a big fuss last night, Gao Zhou patted his chest and explained that he didn't know the news about Su Tong being besieged at all. The reason was precisely because although the beggar gang was large, Master Chu Zhao and the others had no intention of bringing the beggar gang to participate. It is said that it is because you, the beggar clan, have a grudge against Shuigui, and you are worried that if Su Tong has any relationship with Shuigui, the nature of the matter will change if the beggar clan joins in. It will not be clear when the time comes, so you simply did not notify the people of the beggar clan. Only when they got the news did they realize that Su Tong had actually turned things upside down. The number of strangers who died in your hands last night should be less than 2 digits. Fortunately, you are still wearing a mask. You don't know that now all the strangers in the world are eager to skin you and give you a nickname, called. Speaking of which, Gao Zhou lowered his head and whispered in his ear, 7 sects of mad students. The corner of Su Tong's mouth twitched, and he couldn't help but complain, are these people all illiterate? Are they still crazy about giving birth? Are they making me look like I am a kid? Ignoring Gao Zhou's complaints, Su Tong first thought of something serious and hurriedly pulled him aside and said, "Stop gossiping and lend me some scripts first. I'm poor." Big Fat is a special summon. He is not afraid of death, and can be summoned immediately after death. It can be said to be quite powerful. However, the problem is that this guy is super expensive. It takes 300 script points to summon after death. It will not be available for more than 24 hours. To summon, the cost of script points will be doubled, and it will be doubled every other day. At that time, in order to save his life, he summoned Big Fat continuously. As a result, the script points in his hand now only had less than 200 points. It was about to double the time. Since Gao Zhou was here, he just happened to get it first. This matter is resolved. Gao Zhou was not stingy. They were both grasshoppers on the same rope, and it would be difficult for both of them to succeed, so he simply gave Su Tong 400 points of the script. While trading the scripts, he asked in a low voice, "By the way, I also got some news. You were hunted yesterday. It was the news about Feng Lai Lufang. How about we find an opportunity to burn it down tonight?" "Hey, no need." Su Tong grinned, put his arm on Gao Zhou's shoulders and said, "My master has avenged me, and there will be no wind from now on." "Master? Shuigui." Gao Zhou felt refreshed. He had heard from several members of the beggar clan that Shuigui had rescued someone last night. He was so excited that he couldn't sleep a wink all night. He immediately looked around, trying to find Mr. Shui. When Su Tong saw this, he smiled and said, "Don't worry, Master has gone back to Shangqing Palace to rest. After we finish what we are doing, I will take you to see him." His proud little expression was as proud as a child showing off to his friends that he had sold a new game console at home. Gao Zhou nodded repeatedly, but suddenly his eyes widened and he tilted his head to look at Su Tong. "You just said that Master has returned to the Shangqing Palace." "Right." Su Tong looked at him confused, not understanding what the fuss was about. But Gao Zhou slapped his forehead with his hand. "That's bad. The leader of the beggar gang is planning to go to Shangqing Palace to settle accounts with that guy named Chang Miao today." Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 234. Gao Zhou hurriedly ended his conversation with Su Tong and ran to the Shangqing Palace without thinking too much. He was not worried about Chang Miao and Mr. Shui, but he was worried that with the beggar clan gone, he might not be able to see the sun again tomorrow. He finally got to know the old guys from the beggar clan, and he had done 7 or 8 side missions. If the old man were to be wiped out in one go, the beggar clan would be disbanded. By then, he would be there. All the efforts of the beggar gang were in vain. Before leaving, Su Tong stopped him and handed him the spirit card. If necessary, he would take out the card and give it to the master. When he saw the card, the master would know that he was his friend. In fact, it is fitting that the beggar gang is unlucky. Speaking of which, last time, Lida led a group of masters and robbed Chang Miao on the way. He thought that Chang Miao had hidden all the treasures in the city god's temple in the dung cart, so he beat Chang Miao and happily pushed the dung cart. Ran. On the way, Lida had already begun to think that after he pulled out the treasures and divided them among everyone, he could get 1 or 2 inconspicuous treasures and sell them, and then he would be able to break away from the beggar gang and go back to the countryside to build a 2-story Western-style building. Marry a big-assed wife and live your life. As a result, he was talking nonsense all the way. After the dung cart was pulled back to the temporary stronghold of the beggar clan, everyone spent a lot of effort to push the dung cart over, and the big dung inside spilled all over the floor. That scene was really a sea of people, with flags and drums waving. Oh, that's wrong, come again, it should be so vomiting that it makes people dizzy and dizzy. Even an old beggar who has been begging for decades almost got killed on the spot after taking a whiff of it. Send away. Why does it stink so much? Because Chang Miao hid the iron box in which Taoist Zuzu was hiding in the dung truck, he was reluctant to empty the dung in the truck, fearing that Taoist Zuzu would be lost if it was poured back and forth. Fecal water is not the feces in the latrine. There is an essential difference between this stuff. Feces mostly refers to a thing formed after fermentation in a certain period of time and environment. This stuff has been stuffed in the car for who knows how many days. Then the taste is, over the top. Good guy, the entire beggar clan stronghold was blown up on the spot. Lido was also dumbfounded. What surprised him was that when he opened the dung truck, it was full of dung and there were no treasures. He rummaged inside for a while and found an iron box. He immediately regarded it as a treasure and hurriedly opened it. There was only a pig made of yellow paper inside, and it was only half of it. Lai was so angry that he threw the pig directly into the manure water and stepped on it a few times. He didn't even notice the pig's trotters that were struggling at the time. The amplitude is too small, only when the wind blows. Because of this incident, Lido was beaten so badly by a group of beggars gang members that he almost couldn't take care of himself. Even the old leader of the beggar clan almost picked up the dog-beating stick and killed the turtle grandson. Lido was beaten and raised for 2 days. Instead of feeling any regret, Lido began to encourage the old leader of the beggar gang to come directly to rob him. Just then, a beggar came back and said that the antique city was now spreading rumors that all the antiques were of extraordinary value. Matter. When the old beggar heard this, he began to think about it. Can you not think about it? Master Chu Zhao and the others did not involve the beggar gang in their actions. It was already obvious that Shuigui had formed a conflict with the beggar gang. Last time in Hanzhong, several elders all died suddenly, and his precious little son also died at the hands of Shuigui. As a result, the beggar clan is now greatly weakened. Whether they can participate in the Bamang meeting in a month is still one thing. If not, their beggar gang will suffer a big loss this time. After thinking about it, I thought, 1,000 birds in the forest is not as good as a bird in the hand, so why not take this opportunity to grab the things, at least not in terms of people and money? Null. So this time I took the people straight to the Shangqing Palace. Today, the Shangqing Palace only has a few dirt roads and is completely barren. This group of beggars are not afraid of being noticed by the police. They sing songs, hum, and hold hands. Holding a stick and walking up the mountain, if you didn't know better, you might have thought you were going for an outing in the mountains. Lida. The old beggar shouted and called Lai over. Two pairs of triangular eyes looked him up and down. Seeing that Lai felt uncomfortable, he hurriedly came forward and said, "Your orders." The old beggar kicked Lida away a few steps and asked with disgust on his face, "Are you sure that guy is an ordinary person?" He always felt uncomfortable along the way, especially his brows were always beating uncontrollably, and there was always an indescribable feeling in his heart. This was not a good sign, so he had to confirm with Lida again and again. "Don't worry, the kid we beat last time didn't know any kung fu at all, and he's not a stranger. Besides, our people have been keeping an eye on him for a while. He's just a turd." Lida patted his chest and repeated his assurances. In order to reassure the old gang leader, Lida even called the people who beat Chang Miao last time and asked them to testify. After seeing that these people were sure that Chang Miao had no special abilities, the old beggar finally felt relieved. He just said with a pretentious look on his face, "For so many years in our beggar sect, the rule has always been, don't steal or rob. Now I'm afraid that the rule will be broken this time." Lida on the side heard the words and hurriedly explained, "Old gang leader, as the saying goes, the world's treasures belong to those who are virtuous. Besides, we are borrowing them. We will pay them back later. At worst, we will give him an elder of the beggar clan, and treat it as his right to you of filial piety." After Lai finished speaking, the old beggar glared sideways, "What a bastard. Just take it as soon as it's taken. Why do you need to cover your ears like this? Don't be such a hypocrite." Lida was scolded in full, and he nodded in agreement. However, the old beggar changed his words, touched his snow-white beard and frowned, "But what you said makes sense. Be polite first and then fight. Later, you will go in with the 8 diamonds. Remember not to do anything, and speak to him in a gentle manner, understand, we are borrowing it. Good guy, are you playing more hypocritically than me? Is it worth sending out all the 8 Vajras if you treat yourself with courtesy first and then attack with soldiers? Make it clear that I am a bad person." Lida felt like Ming Jing, cursing in his heart. It was good that this matter went smoothly. If something happened in the future, he would be the first to be thrown out and take the blame. But he didn't dare to say these words. When the situation came to pass, he could only bite the bullet and go up. Otherwise, Lida looked around and realized that Bamang Mountain in the wilderness was probably the place where he was buried. Fortunately, when he thought of Chang Miao's timid appearance, he felt a little more at ease. So he patted his chest and reassured the old beggar that there was no problem, then turned around and walked straight to the gate of Shangqing Palace with the so-called 8 great Vajras. I saw 8 beggars, all of them strong, with piercing eyes and bulging temples. They were all disciples of the old beggar. They had learned the truth from the old beggar, so they were called the 8 great Vajras. With these 8 people helping him, Lida naturally felt confident and led his men to kick open the door of Shangqing Palace. "You poop, get the hell out of here." With that said, the 9 people stepped into the gate, not forgetting to close the door. As for the old beggar and others, they sat under the shade of the tree and waited for Lida to carry out the treasure for him. After about 10 minutes, the door of Shangqing Palace was pushed open, and Lida walked out of the door with a red face. When everyone took a closer look, Lida's face was beaten like a monkey's ass. Suddenly everyone was shocked, even the old beggar stood up, looked at Lida's face and said in surprise, "Who beat you like this? Where is the 8 great Vajra?" When Lida heard this, he burst into tears on the spot, crying indistinctly, Woo, old gang leader, you don't know, that guy doesn't follow martial ethics, and he killed us before we finished talking. They were all beaten and told to let you go in to redeem the person, and he also said. What else are you talking about? The old beggar looked unhappy. You also say that your 18 generations of ancestors have all been disgraced. You are a maggot in the cesspool. The latter sentence was added by Lida himself. The corner of the old beggar's mouth twitched, but he was not stupid. Hearing this, he asked, "Nine of you can't beat him? Didn't you say that he is just an ordinary person? It's not the man who pooped. He's a stranger. We don't recognize him," Lida cried out with a grimace. Stranger. The old beggar's heart was filled with excitement. He had never seen any big storms at his age, so he said sternly, "Go and have a look." As he said this, he grabbed Lida and led a group of people inside. Pushing open the door of the Taoist temple, he saw his 8 disciples standing motionless. Seeing this, the old beggar squinted his eyes and looked forward. He saw a man in a coat standing in front of the door of Lejun Hall. "Stand there and wait for them." Next to the pool, there was a man who poked his head out to look at the excitement, thinking that it must be the Chang Miao that Lida said. Immediately, a smile appeared on his face, and he cupped his hands towards the man in front of Lejun Palace and said, "Your Excellency has such great skills, but my 8 disciples are actually unable to defeat you. I just don't know what sect you belong to. Can you give me some advice, Threads?" As the saying goes, don't hit the smiling person with your hand, but the old beggar also lowered his attitude. Unexpectedly, the man just sneered, "Haha, people are tall and have short legs. Don't mention it. It's just the rules of the beggar clan. Don't steal or rob. You'd rather be a starving ghost than a person who has failed in your heart. In the early days of the Republic of China, you beggar clan, how come the rules set in Hankow have been completely corrupted by you?" The smile on the old beggar's face suddenly froze in place. The phrase "a tall man but a short leg" is the lingo of their beggar gang. Beggars who don't know him would say this when they meet. It means that they can't reach high. The so-called rules are the 10 rules set by the beggar gang in Hankow in the early Republic of China. Few people know about this. How did he know? The old beggar suddenly had a bad feeling in his heart and asked quickly, "Who are you?" "Who am I? Never mind." Hiss. Speaking of which, the old beggar would be a ghost if he didn't know who the person in front of him was. Suddenly a chill came over him, and he felt as if there was a big centipede on his back crawling along his spine to the top of his head. Goosebumps stood up. Yesterday's incident had already spread throughout the world. The old beggar didn't know how powerful Shuigui was. He felt cold in his heart and cursed Lida, a fool. He was sending them all to the gate of the King of Hell's palace. Yelling in shock, he turned around and prepared to run away, but it was too late at this time. Shuigui bowed his hands with both hands, and the beggars suddenly felt like the world was spinning. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 235. Boss Wang. Long time no see. What have you been up to lately? I'm just picking up rags. I heard that Boss Zhang has made some big moves recently. Please give me some support. Zhang Zhang's Hong, drink soup, drink soup. It was only 10 o'clock in the evening, and the beef offal soup restaurant was already full of 2 or 3 tables. The business was good, and Wang Gong's father was not in a hurry to go home, and stayed with Wang Gong to take care of the business. Perhaps it was because there were so many living people in the soup house during this period that the occasional guests became increasingly rare. This made Su Tong feel very unhappy, because after seeing Mr. His Bashan button was no more than a mere scratch at best. If it were like Mr. Shui, sending people to the underworld with just a raise of his hand, that would be an unpredictable method. If I could master such a skill, why would I worry about not getting points in the script? Selling specialty products alone is enough to achieve the freedom of scripting. He was just thinking about his sweet dream when Chen Jian nudged him with his elbow. Your friend is back. Su Tong half opened his eyelids and saw Gao Zhou walking in covered with dirt. He looked around and saw Su Tong sitting in front of him with a sad face. "Here you go." Gao Zhou put the spiritual tablet on the table. Su Tong looked at it and couldn't help but asked with a smile, "Why didn't you catch up?" Gao Zhou almost got angry when he heard this. If there weren't so many people in the soup restaurant, he might have jumped up and cursed. After he learned the news from Su Tong, he ran like a playful dog, wishing he had 2 more legs. From Drum Tower to Bamang Mountain, which was an hour and a half away, he made it in 20 minutes. As a result, he rushed over and saw that the beggar gang had long since dispersed. He stopped a beggar and asked about the situation, only to find out that the old gang leader had not been heard from since he entered. Gao Zhou's heart skipped a beat and he knew something was wrong. But he still didn't give up and knocked on the door. It was Chang Miao who opened the door. Gao Zhou handed him the sign and asked him to go in and inform Mr. Shui. Chang Miao came out within 2 minutes of entering and returned the sign. "Give it to him, and tell him directly that he is late and everyone is cold, and ask him if he wants to dig a hole in the back to bury him." Gao Zhou's eyes darkened, and he felt so depressed that he almost vomited. Everyone was ruined. What else could he do to bury his loneliness? Seeing that he was about to leave, Chang Miao quickly changed her tone and said that there was still one person alive, digging a hole in the back and working, and she would only let him in if he agreed to help with the work. Gao Zhou thought for a moment, and with the idea that he could save one by one, he nodded and agreed. When he went in and took a look, he found that there was indeed a living person. It was only when he took a look that he realized that the living person was actually Lida. That guy made Gao Zhou so angry that he raised his fist and punched him hard. It was this trap, and he single-handedly destroyed the number 1 gang today to pieces. If Chang Miao hadn't been holding him aside, he would have wanted to bury this guy alive. "So you've been digging holes with that guy in the backyard until now?" Su Tong asked, suppressing a smile. "No, after everyone has gone in, there is always an explanation." Gao Zhou looked sad. The 8 King Kongs, an old gang leader, and 2 elders were all wiped out. I don't know whether I should say that Mr. Shui was ruthless and killed without restraint, or that the old gang leader was old and had poor brains. After listening to the idiot Lai Da's slander, he insisted on hitting the gun himself. In short, after being massacred by Shui Gui, this beggar gang, which has grown since the early Republic of China, will probably fall apart from now on and will never be able to form a climate again. "Then have you seen Master?" Su Tong hugged the hookah. The huge hookah seemed a bit out of place in the soup restaurant, but the bosses sitting at the table looked at the hookah with 2 eyes. Hair straight. Just by looking at the jade-like paste on the hookah, you can easily tell its age. Looking at the inconspicuous cigarette holder, you can see that it is made of fine red agate. If Chen Jian, a powerful man like Chen Jian, wasn't sitting next to Su Tong, staring at them, someone would have been itching to ask about the price. No, Gao Zhou shook his head, saying that he was very sorry about this matter. He had been working in the Shangqing Palace for a day, but in fact, he wanted to take the opportunity to take a look at the rumored master. After all, I had learned about this master's abilities from my father since I was a child, and I had already developed a feeling of admiration in my heart at a young age. As a result, after finishing the work, I learned from Chang Miao that the master had left early. Gao Zhou was so angry that he picked up Lida and beat him. "Hey, it's over. All my work was in vain. My 2 poor eldest and second brothers are gone now. All my busy work is a waste of emotion. I should have known that when I was in the hotel." Gao Zhuoye wanted to get angry, but it was a pity that Lida had already been beaten to death by him and was thrown out of the Shangqing Palace to die. Otherwise, he really wanted to beat him again now. Su Tong smiled and asked Wang Gong to have another bowl of soup and 2 cakes. "Don't be angry, this is not a bad thing." Su Tong didn't feel sorry at all for the demise of the beggar clan. After spending this day together, he could already feel that the master was killing them all the way, and it seemed that he had no intention of making these strangers feel comfortable. It can even be said that he came here just for these strangers, and he has a strong tendency to wipe out the world with one sleeve. Moreover, today's beggar gangs have long lost the rules they once had. They cheat, kidnap, and steal. Everyone in the gang is a talented person. I learned from the master that there are even some beggars who don't go begging for food themselves and take the stolen children away. They were beaten into cripples and forced to beg on the streets. If they hadn't gone too far, master probably wouldn't have done anything to them. Don't tell me, today Mr. Xue first swept Feng Lelu and then swept away the beggar gang. Is this something that a person can accomplish in one day? I guess tomorrow morning, all those strangers will have to do it. Exploded. Gao Zhou stood up, took the beef offal soup and 2 sesame seed cakes handed over by Wang Gong, sat down again, and said while eating. What Gao Zhou meant was that he was worried that Mr. Xue's vigorous and resolute actions would inevitably push the world's strangers to the opposite side. Then it would be like in reality, one person ascends to Bamang, one person takes on everything, and the last person ends sadly. Su Tong didn't speak, and the smoke came out from his mouth and nose. This was what he was worried about. In reality, he didn't want to see the ending of his master. Since reality cannot be changed, at least in this script world, can I give the master a satisfactory result? Now the main task 1 undercurrent has prompted me to complete it as early as at the train station, but the main task 2 has not yet prompted me. What if the second task is to go against the master? As for the side task waiting for the wind to come, I have not been reminded to complete the task until now. He initially thought that the wind referred to his master, but now it seemed that it didn't, so what did the wind refer to? Right now they're like people who have been given a script but don't know how to change the course of the script. Just as he was thinking about it, Chen Jian's eyes suddenly lit up. Here he comes. I saw a car parked in front of the door. After the door opened, Sun Ding, dressed in a white suit, stepped out of the car. With his handsome face and high-end clothes, he looked like the Prince Charming in the hearts of all girls. He opened the car door and stretched out a delicate bare hand. With his shiny black high heels stepping on the muddy stone bricks, a woman wearing a cheongsam stepped out from behind the car door. Immediately, the eyes of the bosses who were sitting at the table nearby and drinking soup were all fixed on the young woman as if they were magnets. Hey, I'm a good boy, I'm really beautiful. If I marry this wife, I will come home on time every day, Zhang San said with a bang. It's a hit. Don't look at your fat figure. Her face looks like that big wolf dog. Look at the bracelet she wears on her left hand. Even if you sell all the broken bottles and cans on your hand, it won't be worth it. The bosses took a look and realized that was not it. The bracelet on the woman's wrist glowed with a bright fluorescence under the dim light. It was a high bright sun green, and the floating flowers on it were like ink, with no flaws to be found. It is said that swords are given to heroes, and this bracelet is a perfect match on a woman's wrist, which is pleasing to the eye. TCH, no matter how good looking you are still old. Chen Jian is indeed a straight man. When facing a woman, the first thought in his mind is, old. Su Tong and Gao Zhou sat aside and smiled without saying a word. The woman glanced around the soup restaurant. When the mother and son saw the handsome-looking Su Tong, their expressions could not help but perk up. After the mother and son looked at each other for a moment, the mother and son carefully sat on the empty table and chairs nearby. It was still early, and Su Tong was not in a hurry. They were not fishing, and they were indeed ready to sell the antiques they had. However, Su Tong felt that he was okay when it came to being versatile, but when it came to appraising treasures, he was blind in this regard. After all, among the old guys I have been in contact with since childhood, except for the fact that there are no cooks, I have never seen a lunatic with this kind of side profession. I have seen a few tomb robbers who pretended to be crazy and were taken to the hospital for evaluation. So if they want to sell it at a good price and get the mother and son to take the bait, they still need to wait for the mysterious guest to come to their door. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning when the bell on the door frame finally rang. Everyone was refreshed and looked towards the door. It was the same man, dressed in simple black clothes. After walking in from the door, he glanced at Su Tong and others, nodded kindly, and sat at the door again. Superior. Seeing that the rightful owner had arrived, Su Tong raised his eyebrows slightly and kicked Chen Jian beside him with his toes. Wang Gong, a clever little guy, even put away the chopsticks basket and salt box on the table with quick hands and feet, and specially covered them with a thick layer of linen cloth. When Chen Jian placed all the things on the table from under the chair, everyone's eyes were fixed on the white bowl, and their hearts started to beat faster. Let's make one quote per person, Su Tong said, glancing at the mother and son out of the corner of his eye, and said calmly, we are at an exchange meeting, exchanging items for items. Everyone is trading, and we do not accept cash transactions. Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 236. If you don't accept cash transactions, you are just a fool. Upon hearing Su Tong's words, some people on the spot couldn't stand it anymore and were ready to leave. These people all came after hearing the news and came with money in their hands. The briefcases in their hands were full of brand new $10 bills. Just to raise money, I don't know how many accounts have been opened. In the end, I won't accept cash transactions. Who can bear it? He left immediately cursing, but there were some who stayed, like the fat Zhang San, who took a sip of soup in a leisurely manner, smashed it with his mouth, closed his eyes and looked tipsy, not knowing what was going on. I thought I was drinking tea. After a group of people left, the fat man joked with a smile on his face, you are a bunch of fools. It is illegal to resell cultural relics. This is an exchange meeting. The important thing is to communicate and play with each other. Zhang San exchanged glances with each other as he spoke, and everyone nodded wildly and tacitly, yes, Boss Zhang is right. Let's follow Boss Zhang's ideas. Our little life will become more and more promising, ha ha ha. Everyone burst into laughter and praised Boss Zhang. But after giving the thumbs up, everyone was still in trouble. If it were for other things, it would be easy to say, but the treasures on the table are all valuable, especially the upside-down awning lamp, which is authentic Sean-Kill white porcelain. It is valuable in itself. If you can take it back and find an old craftsman to embed the white porcelain with gold edges, the price will not just double. It's really difficult for them to exchange things for things and to come up with something that makes people excited. Seeing everyone's embarrassed expressions, Su Tong added in a leisurely manner, antiques, antiques, in the final analysis, they are still for fun. I am more interested in those folk items, such as this kind of thing. As long as it is good, you can exchange it for something good. Su Tong smiled and took out the money mold with holes on it and put it on the table as a reference. Gao Zhou was startled when he heard this and thought to himself, hey, aren't you here to investigate the case? It's been a long time, are you here to cash out? However, after Gao Zhou complained for a while, his heart skipped a beat. He thought carefully about whether that was cashing out. Too many things in this era have been buried. Many treasures are regarded as garbage. If you can really find one or two treasures, these antiques are nothing. Yet, when Gao Zhou thought of this, he rummaged through the prop book and took out some strange-looking things and put them on the table for reference by the antique dealers. This time, Zhang San and the others were so happy on the spot that they walked closer and started to take a look. After looking around for a long time, they immediately began to hide aside and discuss among themselves. After they stood up, they saw Sun Ding's mother and son walking up. The two of them looked at Su Tong first. The woman first raised her hands towards Su Tong, It turns out that Senior is interested in folk customs and foreign objects. I'm here, but there is something that seniors might as well take a look at. The woman took out a small red cloth bag from the small bag at hand and handed it to Su Tong. Su Tong Zhuang looked at it pretendingly, clasped the bag in his hand, quickly threw it into the prop book, and then took it out in the blink of an eye. The whole process was so fast that it caught people by surprise. To outsiders, it seemed like he was just throwing the bag into the prop book. Just a turn of the palm. At that moment, Su Tong only saw an entry in the prop book that needed to be appraised. Obviously, this thing did have some value. But he wasn't sure what it was. Pass the bag, it's from Luz, who at this time, the man sitting at the door glanced at Su Tong's hand and said, the wedding customs in Luz are that during the wedding, the bride slowly walks into the door of her husband's house. A red bag is passed forward in turn with the bride's footsteps, so it is called passing bag. After finishing speaking, the man took another look at the stitches on the bag. Seeing that the bag had not been opened yet, he couldn't help but ask, "You didn't open this bag?" The woman was startled and looked back at the man sitting at the door. Unexpectedly, there was an expert sitting here. She nodded, "We collected this from an old man's house when we passed by Hefei. What is in it?" "I didn't say anything, they just sold it to us cheaply. I saw that the bag was so good that I didn't want to open it. A good thing is a top-notch embroiderer. In the past, there would be some gold and silver treasures in the bag, which meant that the family's wealth would be passed down from generation to generation. Ordinary people would put some copper coins, or at worst, some nuts and the like. It's something, but the embroidery work on this bag is so good. It's made of shoe brocade material and Su embroidery work. No matter how bad it is inside, it's still golden melon seeds. So, don't we make a profit?" The woman's eyes lit up and she looked at the pass bag in her hand with anticipation. Even Zhang San and others looked at the small pass bag in the woman's hand, and their eyes suddenly became hot. It is said to be so, but there is another theory. However, at this time, the man suddenly changed his voice, stared at the bag and said, "If this family has been very unlucky recently and the elderly in the family are about to die of illness, they will hold a party. Happy events bring joy, and at this time, people who are thoughtful will distribute the passing bags to everyone. There will be some bad things in them. If anyone opens them, they may be plagued by bad luck." After hearing this, everyone's expressions became unnatural when they looked at the small pass bag again. The man's implication was clearly to remind the woman that among the two possibilities, the latter was very likely. After all, if you think about it, you should know that since you are a local, you must know the custom of passing the bag. Why? If you sell it without opening it to see what's inside, doesn't it show that something is wrong and you're trying to deceive outsiders? For a moment, the woman's face changed, as if she was startled. As soon as her hand loosened, the bag fell from her hand, and Su Tong reached out and grabbed it in his palm. While the woman was in confusion, he threw the bag into the props book. This time, the props book immediately showed an entry about the bag. Pass bag. Don't open it, don't open it, don't open it. After opening the bag, you will be attacked by the resentful spirits inside, but if you can destroy the resentful spirits, you may be surprised. Interesting. Looking at the entries in the props book, Su Tong immediately became happy. This is a folk blind box of emotions, so he took out the bag again, put it in his hand and said, "It's interesting. I want this. I want this." You choose one of the several paintings. Oh. You can't open it and look at it, the one you pick is the one. The woman's eyes lit up, and her son Sun Ding clenched his fists excitedly. He looked at the paintings on the table, hesitated for a moment, and then grabbed one of the volumes. Everyone gathered around and opened it to take a look. Lying in the snow looking for plum blossom pictures. Zhang San almost pounced on this painting when he saw it. It was a painting by Zhao Menfu, a master of the Yuan dynasty, and his signature song Xiu Taoist could not be wrong. Zhang San was so excited that he almost jumped up. This thing can be called a national treasure, but it was actually exchanged for a small bag. Now Zhang San and others felt as uncomfortable as if they were being pricked with needles. As an audience member, Zhang San was so excited, not to mention Sun Ding and his son, whose hands were shaking with excitement. Fake. Unexpectedly, the man standing at the door glanced at it and immediately concluded that this thing was fake. Impossible. Zhang San's voice suddenly became louder. I have been playing with antiques for most of my life. I can tell whether they are genuine or not at a glance. Just by looking at the color of the paper, it cannot be fake. The paper is real, the paintings are fake. Just cut out 12 copies of a piece of paper, take out the top 3 layers and sell them separately, add a layer of rice paper, and then put the fake ones in. This is not what you often do. What? As soon as the man said this, Zhang San and the others were stunned for a moment. They climbed over the painting carefully and saw some clues. Fake. Zhang San's face turned red for a moment. It didn't matter if he got hit in the eye, the feeling of being slapped in the face in public made him very unhappy. Fake? If it's fake, why put it here? Sun Ding's face looked a little unhappy, but the woman immediately put the painting away. Even if it was fake, this painting was worth a lot of money. As for the fake method, it was better than her passing bag. But Sun Ding still looked at the piece of white porcelain on the table unwillingly. Su Tong sat aside and watched. Seeing that Sun Ding's eyes never left the piece of white porcelain, he coughed twice and said to the woman, I heard that there was a Buddha head murder case some time ago, but the Buddha statue it disappeared in the evidence room. If anyone can find the Buddha statue, I will give this bowl to him. Chen Jian was sitting aside. Hearing this, he couldn't help but turn around and look at Su Tong, thinking, shouldn't we be provided with clues and we can find them ourselves? When the stone Buddha was mentioned, everyone couldn't help but look at each other, and the eyes of Sun Ding and his son also became strange. Sun Ding hesitated and wanted to speak, but the woman quietly held his hand. Seeing that there was no movement from the mother and son, Su Tong stopped talking nonsense. Today's exchange meeting was a bit rushed. Everyone must not be ready yet. Let's come back tomorrow night. After saying that, he asked Chen Jian and Gao Zhou to put away their things, and planned to go back to the master to learn the importance of worshipping the mountain buckle. A side mission was not worth his efforts. If Sun Ding and his son really wanted these treasures, they would help him figure out the matter about the stone Buddha, otherwise he would rather smash all these things than give them to them. When they got to the door, Wang Gong had already handed over the prepared soup pot. Su Tong was holding the soup pot and was about to leave. At this time, a shout suddenly came from behind him. Etc. As soon as he turned around, he saw the master appraiser walking up, which surprised Su Tong. This guest could open a mouth when appraising antiques, but he was usually taciturn. He actually came to me today. Could it be that he was overthinking it? Are you ready to reincarnate? The man walked up to Su Tong, made a few gestures and said, that money model is the one with a hole. I can fix it. Bang. The man's voice fell, and before Wang Gong understood what was going on, he saw the soup pot in Su Tong's hand falling to the ground with a thud. Looking at Su Tong again, he saw his eyes shining brightly, staring straight at him. Looking at this master appraiser, his expression was as passionate as a centuries-old pervert seeing a peerless beauty. Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 237. You said you could fix this. No wonder Su Tong was so surprised when he heard this. You must know that the money mold in his hand is not wood, but money and the ability to make money. If this thing can be repaired, I don't have to do anything, just immerse myself in making money. When the Bamang meeting comes, I still need the master to take action. With a wave of my hand, Imperman is in power, surrounded by evil soldiers, and all monsters and ghosts are scum. Can and can't. The man looked at the sky and realized that the golden rooster was about to croak, so he didn't beat around the bush and said bluntly, I can help you repair it, but you also have to help me find someone. Maybe it's not a person, she is here, too. If she is not here, I can hardly remember her appearance. I only remember her name, which is Wan Rong. If you find her, I will help you fix it. Su Tong was dumbfounded. You've been talking about feelings for a long time, are you performing tongue twisters with me? Not to mention he was dumbfounded, Wang Gong beside him was also dizzy. What does it mean that she is a human being and not a human being? She is here but not here. I can barely remember her appearance. I only gave her a name. Where can I find her? But after the man finished speaking, Su Tong also received a task prompt from the prop book. You have received a special mission, the Watcher of Time and Space. You have received a special mission. This mission is an advanced mission and requires you to become a certified player before you can activate it and view the mission information. After hearing the task prompt, Su Tong was immediately confused. It seemed that the woman named Wan Rong in the man's mouth was not from this era. This made him feel disappointed. It seemed that repairing the money model would be a long process, and there was definitely no help at the moment. However, one code leads to another. Although there is no way to repair the money mold immediately, at least there is a direction for repair, which is much better than running around blindly like a headless fly. Thinking of this, Su Tong no longer struggled with this issue. He looked at the man, what's your name? The man scratched his head and thought for a while, but he couldn't remember anything after thinking about it. What's my name? My name is, Li. No. Zhao, that's not right either. Who am I? When the man said this, his eyes became blank. He seemed to be trapped in a silly mystery and couldn't extricate himself. He raised his head and walked in the direction of the drum tower, talking nonsense as if talking to himself, until disappeared from the sight of the two people. Hey hiss ouch. Looking at the man's disappearing figure, Wang Gong finally remembered that this man was not a living person. He couldn't help but tremble, quickly picked up the pot, ran back and made another soup and delivered it. Su Tong took the soup pot and turned around to leave. He was thinking about his master, so he walked extra fast. When he returned to Shangqing Palace with the soup, it was still dark. When I walked in, I didn't see Master Shuigui. He obviously hadn't come back yet. When I looked again, I found that Chang Miao was sleeping soundly on the bed. She was snoring loudly. Normally at this time, Chang Miao would have been sleeping soundly. It's time to get up and go poop. But today, Chang Miao slept in for the first time. This legend finally surprised him. In fact, the reason why Chang Miao slept in was because she was scared yesterday. Even if the people from the beggar clan came for him, they were still living people. How exciting was it for Chang Miao to be sent to see the king of hell by Shuigui. He didn't go crazy on the spot, which is considered mentally tough, but it was indeed a bit irritating, so much so that he peed his pants at the time. This is also the reason why the master did not kill Li Da. On the one hand, he felt that Li Da's cheerfulness was not worthy of him. On the other hand, it was because Chang Miao was so frightened that she could only leave one coolie to work for Chang Miao. Hey, sir, you're awake. As soon as Su Tong put down the soup pot, a figure came out from the corner. Su Tong looked back and saw that Cao had arrived, and it turned out to be Li Da. Seeing Li Da, Su Tong couldn't help but be a little surprised to see his enthusiastic expression, and immediately understood that Li Da regarded him as Chang Miao. But he didn't think about explaining this problem to Li Da, and asked directly, why are you here? He, uncle, I have nothing to do. You have something to eat? If you reward me with a little bit, I can just be a cow or a horse for you. As Lida spoke, his eyes were fixed on the pot of broth. The aroma of the broth wafted over, making him salivate. Su Tong originally wanted to drive this guy away, but then he thought about it. It happened that Chang Miao had a hard time defecating alone all day long, so it would be okay to leave someone to help him. Just as he was thinking about it, he suddenly remembered something. He glanced at Lida from the corner of his eye and saw Lida standing there with a mean look on his face. Su Tong calmly put his hands behind his back and said with a somewhat embarrassed expression, "Okay. I'll heat up the soup, and you go outside to get some firewood." "Okay." Upon hearing Su Tong's agreement, Lida's voice became louder than before, and he turned around and walked out. But as soon as he turned around, a strong wind suddenly hit behind him. Lida's body froze, and then his body made an inhuman movement like rubber clay. His body turned sideways to avoid Su Tong's blow. His feet turned into a ball of blood mist and flew back. "Get away." As the blood mist rushed towards him, Su Tong seemed to have been prepared for it. He activated his demonic power and a dark blue fire light instantly lit up the air in front of him. The blood mist was not afraid of this demonic flame, but it didn't know that there seemed to be an extraordinary aura on the demonic flame. Under this aura, its power seemed to be suppressed in an instant, and it was caught off guard and most of it was evaporated by the demonic flame. Shui Mist let out a scream and rolled on the ground, rolled out of the kitchen, spun around on the ground, and then transformed into a human form again. It's just that this person only has a shape, but no skin. His body is covered in blood and flesh, and even his facial features are a mess. His eyes, ears, mouth, and nose are twisted together, and he screams at Su Tong, "How did you find me, of?" Su Tong looked at the bloody man in front of him and asked, "Who are you?" "Neither human nor ghost." "I kill you." Hearing this, the bloody man rushed forward again as if he was desperate. Seeing this, Su Tong took a step back, raised his leg and kicked the soup pot away. The scalding hot soup inside covered the bloody man head on, making the blood boil. The man screamed, and when he looked up again, he saw that Su Tong Gren was no longer in the kitchen. His two asymmetrical eyes looked left and right, and when he was looking for Su Tong's figure, a whistle came from above his head. When he looked up, he saw Su Tong squatting on the roof, looking at him with a smile. "For you." Su Tong waved his hand and sprinkled a handful of snow-white sand on his head. The bloody man quickly raised his hand to block it, but he didn't know that when it was sprinkled on his body, it immediately melted away, and his whole body was on fire. "Salt!" The bloody man screamed and fell to the ground. His body was twisting and turning like mud. In an instant, his body turned into a ball-like thing. And whether it was due to the salt, the size of the ball was getting smaller and smaller. Does it really work? Su Tong originally wanted to give it a try, but he didn't expect the salt to be really useful. Thinking of this, he looked towards the kitchen again. After finally waiting for the burning sensation to disappear, the flesh ball was about to return to its human form when he suddenly found Su Tong standing in front of him and reached out to grab him. "Well done." Seeing Su Tong reaching out to grab it, Rukaiu felt a burst of joy in his heart. Just when he was about to take the opportunity to make this guy unable to eat, Rukaiu suddenly found that his power had disappeared. Strictly speaking, he was suppressed by a special aura, just like the demonic flame just now. It carried a force that made it irresistible, making him unable to move. He could only watch helplessly as this guy looked like picking it up like a ball of mud, holding it in the palm of your hand. What's going on? Why is this happening? In doubt, Su Tong did not harm him further, but walked to a water tank and threw him directly into the tank. "What are you going to do?" Rukaiu looked at Su Tong's disappearing figure, and suddenly felt a bad feeling in his heart. After a while, when Su Tong reappeared, he only saw a big clay pot in his hand. When the clay pot was opened, Meatball immediately became alert, fearing that this guy would sprinkle salt on himself again, but this time it was not salt, but bright red chili oil. Don't. Seeing that this guy was about to spill the chili oil, the round meatballs immediately trembled and screamed, but Sutong didn't care about this and just poured down the whole jar. I thought there would be another scream from the water tank, but it turned out to be quiet after falling down. Sutong poked his head out and looked down, only to find that the meatball had a big mouth and swallowed all the peppers. While eating, he stuck out his tongue and cursed fiercely at Sutong. "Come on, is this all you have? I'm not afraid of you." Huh. Looking at the big mouthful of red oil, Sutong tilted his neck and looked at the meatballs in the tank with shining eyes, as if he had discovered a new world, and then silently took out the vinegar bottle. Aha, it was getting brighter, and Chang Miao yawned loudly and walked out of the room. Her eyes were still red, and her face looked listless, as if she didn't sleep well last night. When he walked out of the room, he saw the soup pot on the ground. He couldn't help but frown. When he raised his head, he saw Sutong standing in front of the water tank with his back to him, holding a bucket of rapeseed oil in his hand. He couldn't help but shake his head. "What are you fussing about so early in the morning?" When Sutong heard this, his hand paused for a moment, but he quickly continued to hold the oil bucket and continued to pour oil into the water tank. He squinted his eyes and said with a bad smile, "Hey, it's okay. Seeing how hard you are working, I plan to make some pickles for you to try." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Script Killing. Author, Guo Shui Gan Xiao. Chapter 238. Naturally, Chang Miao didn't eat the pickles made by Sutong. He was in a hurry to poop. He finally managed to collect all the poop in several villages under Bamang. If he was lazy, he would be robbed by others. So Chang Miao took one look at it and went out to poop without thinking much. She didn't even notice that the water tank was shaking slightly. Sutong squinted as he watched Chang Miao leave, then turned to look at the meatballs soaked in oil in the water tank. I wonder if it was because of the rapeseed oil that the red meatballs had now turned into dishes. "What are you?" he tried to ask. He was sure that this guy was not a human being. Even if he was an evil person, he would not turn himself into this. After Rakayu struggled in the vegetable oil for a while, he finally turned into a villain again, but instead of answering Sutong's question, he pointed at him and cursed. Sutong punched him down and immediately smashed him into a meatball. When he poked it with his finger, he found that the meatball was quite soft and waxy when he poked it, and it was also very elastic. It would take a long time to make a hole after it poked a hole. Slow healing, this made him come up with a bold idea. Silently he put his hand down and took out a big, thick, rolling pin. It's a pity that the fool is not there, otherwise I might not be tired after playing for a whole day. While he was playing, he suddenly heard a familiar voice coming from behind him. "Hey, are you already playing?" When Sutong turned around, he realized that his master had been standing behind him at some point, and from what his master said, he seemed to know the origin of this thing. "When did you come back?" Seeing the master coming back, Sutong hurriedly moved the chair over, picked up the thermos bottle and poured a cup of hot water for the master, and put it on the table. Instead of asking about the origin of this thing, Sutong asked the master why he came back now. "Did you come back yesterday? Where are you going tonight?" Shuigui took a sip of hot water from the cup, put the cup aside, and said casually, "Make some room for you, otherwise this thing will always be behind your butt. On the other hand, if your hands are itchy and you don't feel satisfied, just go let's see some old friends and send them down early to enjoy their happiness." Good guy, it was obviously a matter of murder and arson, but when it came to the master's words, it seemed like he was doing good things to others, relaxed and natural, without asking for anything in return. But after hearing the master's words, Su Tong looked back at the water vat behind his butt. So, this thing has been following me for a while. In just 2 days, I started following you from the moment I brought you out of the train station. I thought it would be better to have a long-term pain than a short-term pain. I gave him a chance and turned him into this without thinking about you. As he spoke, the master curiously put his head into the water tank, looked at the meatballs, and joked, "Look, you know that I have discovered you a long time ago, but you still haven't got some brains, so I can make my own will my disciples suffer a loss." After hearing this, the meatball began to squirm in the tank. Su Tong stood aside and listened, and couldn't help complaining, "Master, you didn't remind me earlier. You just wasted my pot of broth. I was planning to make some noodles for you at noon." In fact, this guy's ability to imitate is really vivid, and Su Tong is not familiar with Lida, so this guy almost got through. But success depends on being big, and failure depends on being big. The reason why he was discovered by Su Tong was because he imitated the wrong person. Because Gao Zhou had just told him last night about beating up Lida, and here Lida actually appeared next to him unscathed. Isn't this a point question? The master said nonchalantly, "Then let's go out to eat. I'm in a good mood today. Let's go have a meal. As for this thing that is neither human nor ghost, it is just a bit of a Taoist resentment at best. There are too many of these things in the yin and yang Dao. You have it. It smells like hell, but it can't hurt you." With this reminder from his master, Su Tong suddenly remembered that he had a buff on him, which increased the damage to ghost creatures by 300%. This buff could only last for 30 hours, so Su Tong never took it to heart. No wonder this guy looks so awesome, but turns out to be a paper tiger. I'm afraid the reason is precisely because of the existence of this underworld buff. Sure enough, Rakayu immediately became honest as soon as he heard the word Huanquan. However, this thing following you seems to have some cause and effect with you. It is not that simple to eradicate it completely. After the teasing, the master's expression became serious and he spoke seriously. His cause and effect. Hearing his master's reminder, Su Tong immediately realized the origin of this thing, which was polypoma. He remembered that when he was struck by lightning, the prop book had reminded him of it. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but after calmly calling out the props book and looking through the historical information, there was indeed this piece of news. Warning. If the polyp tumor is damaged, you will suffer backlash from the body's resentful spirits. It seems that the master's reminder is indeed correct. This thing does have some cause and effect with him. The master must have seen this level before sending himself into the underworld. While healing himself, he also allowed himself to experience the taste of the underworld. Well, master, this wave is indeed in the atmosphere. Su Tong silently gave a thumbs up, admiring his master more and more, and stepped forward to squeeze his shoulders. Then what do you do with this thing? The master glanced at the thing in the water tank, squinted his eyelids and whispered, "This thing is useful, I will give you a trick, you put it away." Received. Su Tong was about to ask, but he saw the master hurriedly covered his mouth and said with a smile, "No hurry, we will talk about it tonight, let's go eat first." As he spoke, the master threw a piece of yellow paper from his sleeve. The paper turned into a small paper mountain in mid-air. After falling into the tank, Su Tong heard a scream coming from the tank. When I got closer and took a look, I saw that the thing had been crushed into a meat pie by an invisible force and could not move. "Let's go." The master urged Su Tong to hurry up. It seemed that the master was really hungry. Su Tong asked curiously on the way. Only then did he know that after the master cleaned up the beggar gang yesterday, he ran non-stop to the old city and found a group of strangers hiding in the homes of residents in the old city and killed them easily. Then he started looking for them, and spent a whole night searching for the alien dens hiding in residents' homes. The master found 4 in one night, and he didn't miss any of them. To say the least, he killed a dozen strangers in one night. Like a cat addicted to catching mice, he didn't stop until daybreak. Seeing the excitement on Master's face, Su Tong's heart felt numb. He knew well that there is a saying that wherever there is oppression, there is resistance. The Master has only been in L City for a few days. On the first day, he rescued himself in public and killed 2 famous seniors. On the second day, he destroyed the beggar gang and closed Feng Lai Tower. On the third day then he began to massacre the strangers hiding in the old city. At this speed, I'm afraid the master will wipe them out before the Bamang conference starts in a month. If he were Senju and the others, I might not be able to sit still at this moment. As if aware of the doubts on Su Tong's face, the master stretched out his hand and gently swept away the dust on his clothes and said, "What, do you think the master did something wrong?" Su Tong was startled and shook his head blankly. He didn't know how to answer this question. He vaguely felt that if the master did this, he would definitely provoke a crazy counterattack from the strangers in the world. As the saying goes, being too strong is easy to break, but the master does not need to be so tough. Come. Seeing his blank look, the master nodded. Son, let me ask you a question. What do you think is the biggest in the world? Su Tong frowned slightly. He had heard Mr. Song explain this question before, so he answered without thinking, the rules are the most important. After hearing this answer, the master nodded happily. As he walked, he said, 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors up to now, everything, everyone, and all walks of life have their own rules. Those industries without rules will only appear briefly and then disappear from people's sight. So you destroyed the beggar gang because they stopped following the rules. After hearing what the master meant, Su Tong probably understood something in his heart and said tentatively, yes, there are no rules or squares. As the saying goes, Tao, Dharma, techniques, and utensils, Tao is ranked first as a direction, Dharma is ranked second as a rule, and techniques are means, and utensils are tools. Nowadays, there are strangers in the world, and Tao is ignored. They are doomed to fail if their methods are weak, their skills and tools are practical, and they try to use means and tools to change the rules and directions. The master couldn't help but look at Su Tong. Didn't you also say at the station that they are all the dregs of the old era? Yes, since they are the dregs of the old era, they should stay in this old era and disappear with the will of history. Is their destination, and this is the best ending. Su Tong listened blankly to his master's words, subconsciously thinking of the old monk at White Horse Temple, and couldn't help but say, smash the reality Buddha and get rid of the demon in your heart. When the master heard this, his face suddenly became shocked, his eyes gradually became hot, and he slapped him hard with his palm, almost knocking Su Tong to the ground. He only heard him say with excitement, well said, smash the Buddha of reality and get rid of the demons in your heart, ha 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 ha. The master had not laughed so heartily for a long time. He was as stunned as a demon, and he kept repeating, smash the Buddha of reality and get rid of the demon in your heart. This frightened Su Tong beside him, thinking that the master might have gone crazy, right? It was a bit difficult for him to understand why these words made master so happy, but seeing the sincere pride on master's face, he couldn't help but feel deeply encouraged. It seems that master, like the old monk at White Horse Temple, has unique views and thoughts on this era. I wonder if the two of them could meet. Just as he was thinking about it, the master finally regained his composure. Shuigui felt indescribably comfortable. He thought that his trip was destined to be an outrageous move that would make everyone in the world angry. But when he heard these words, the master realized that there were actually people with the same idea in the world. These words had far-reaching meanings and were a recognition of what he had done. They were like a big flag, a slogan, and a mission. Famous recognition has extraordinary meaning to Shwegui. Shwegui, who was in a good mood, walked forward with a smile and grabbed Sutong's wrist. Come on, let's have a big meal. After the big meal, I will teach you how to worship the mountain buckle. Infinite script killing. Author, Guo Shuigan Xiao. Chapter 239. Last night, I accidentally stepped on the scale and almost thought I had made a mistake. My weight of 220 kilograms actually turned into 200. I had not considered losing weight recently, but suddenly I lost 20 kilograms of meat. It made me panic. A sudden weight loss is a sign of a serious illness, so I didn't update last night and went to bed early. I spent a long time in the hospital today, taking blood tests and waiting for the results. In the end, it was diabetes. Hey, let's talk about serious illness. This thing is not a particularly serious illness. Let's talk about minor illness. You have to control it, otherwise complications will break out and the person will be finished. So when I came back, I went to the mall again and bought a lot of things that I usually don't eat. I am especially grateful to my wife, who silently accompanied me when I was almost going crazy, made me customized recipes, and stocked up on a lot of things. Blood sugar medications. I wanted to sit down and concentrate on typing, but I was in a bad mood and couldn't mobilize my emotions to get involved. After all, starting today, the delicacies in my world have completely disappeared. So I took a special day off to talk to you about some issues with this copy, which can be regarded as a concentrated answer to the questions in the book review area. First, the protagonist is always a running companion in the script. This does not stipulate that the protagonist cannot complete the task from the perspective of a bystander in the early stage. From my understanding, the protagonist's current strength is far from reaching the level of influencing a plot world. At least after obtaining certification before, there were very few things he could change. Don't forget that there is a setting in the book called the rejection effect. If you do something too much, you will be rejected by the world, unless the protagonist has the ability to ignore the consequences of rejection. Second, the protagonist gives up the interests that should belong to him just to make the enemy sick. Well, from a normal perspective, this is difficult to understand, but from a madman's perspective, there is nothing wrong with it. In the world of madmen, the word profit is not actually the first priority. They care more about their own like. Third, what does it mean to smash the Buddha of reality and get rid of the demons in your heart? Under the characteristics of the times, the old monk is very clear that Buddhism have been deformed under the constraints of the old era. The Buddha statues in temples have become tools to fool the people. Bulls, ghosts, and snake gods are prevalent. Look at the customs of the old era, let alone women. Even men may not be able to bear it, so these dregs should be smashed, and cleaned before we can move forward into a new era. Compared with the current weird behavior of Wan, or the caste system of Asin, what are the differences? Naturally, everyone understands in their hearts. Fourth, the appearance of Wan Quan in this book is connected with Wan Quan and the Postman, forming a coherence among the three books? No. One book is a book after another. Wan Quan and Postman are special cases. I have no intention of making this book consistent with Postman. Fifth, is there a female protagonist? How many? Open a harem. Wan Quan's harem makes me very angry. No. Sixth, does the protagonist have a team? I won't answer it yet, it would involve spoilers. I remember that when this book was put on the shelves, the first order was 400. Many people said that I could be a eunuch, but now it is 2,800, climbing from 400 to 2,800. It is not an impressive achievement, and it is not worth it considering the starting point. Mention it. But it also gave me the motivation to continue. Due to physical reasons, I have to change my work and rest routine starting today, and start exercising to lose weight. My liver function is temporarily unavailable, so I will finish the update honestly. I want to lose weight, try to control my weight, at least reduce it to 160 pounds before October. 160 pounds, a wave of women's clothing? Haha, just kidding. After all, your body is the most important thing. Everyone, I'm sorry for today. Please take a day off. Good night everyone.